Yep, it's a wrap for 2024. Here we are at nearly the end of the year, and it's been an amazing year, hasn't it? Hello, I'm Karen Swain, accentuating the positive, expanding and exploring consciousness on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network on 107.7 and 105.3 FM syndicated radio all over the place. We're going to talk about what has been in 2024 and what's to come in 2025, and how we can be the change makers, the difference makers, the star seeds, the wanderers, the light workers, the light weavers, and get what we want in 2025 coming up.
You got to accentuate the positive. Wow, I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do.
Happy New Year to everybody who is coming into the new year. It's the 30th of December here in Australia, the 29th in the US, a couple of days before the end of the year. And so I thought I'd do a show talking about how we are the creators of our reality, look back at what has been and look forward as what is to come. I know Eckhart Tolle always says the power of now, the power of now. But you know what? We're doing all of that right now in the now. And I want to say hi to Shirley and Sun. Hello, who are watching online. There's a few of you watching online. So this is also a Q&A. If you have any questions about how you are the creator of your reality and how you can get what you want, it's a fascinating conversation. We had a group yesterday, small group in the Inner Sanctum, talking just about that, how we can be change makers and be influencers, powerful influencers for changing the world to the way we want to see it instead of what we dislike about the world. I've been watching a lot of media lately, and I was saying to the group yesterday, there's a great, I don't know what streaming platform it's on, but it's a mini series called Miss America about the 70s and about the women's movement in the 70s. And how there was a opposition to equal rights for women from other women. And fascinating to see how people are struggling to make change in the world, more equality, more unity, more peace, more love in the world, and how they go about getting what they want. And watching this on television, most of us, and you'll see it across the world on all the news platforms, most of us, when we look out into the world, and we see what we don't like, we get up in arms about it and we get really angry about it and we scream and yell and shout and say, no, I don't want this. I want change. I want something different. But in fact, to be a powerful, deliberate creator of your reality, pushing against what you don't like just holds it in place. The laws of the universe govern this way. What you resist persists. So this is personally in your life, but also globally. And as I was watching the show, I was saying to the group yesterday online, how many parts, maybe it was a 7-part miniseries, I watched the whole, maybe it was 4, I can't remember. But at the end, they were saying that, now what is it, Shirley, remind me again, the Reform Women's Association, the R, what was it, Equal Rights, the E, Equal Rights, ERA? You'll have to tell me. How they were ratifying, trying to pass this law for equal rights for women in the 70s and the 80s, to have women to have equal rights. The Women's Lib movement, it was called. But there was so much dissension in the ranks. There was so much anger at how women didn't have equal rights that, do you know, it took the ERA, thanks, Di. Just remind me what it stands for. The Equal Rights Association, is that what it stands for? Equal Rights Associations, yeah. There was so much pushback against what was so unfair that, do you know, it took up until 2018 for this law to be passed in some of the states in America. I don't know about the rest of the world, but as we look out into the world, in different countries, women still do not have equal rights. Here we are moving into 2025, and globally, we're still not seen as equal in religion, in many governments, and many societies. So how do we create more unity and equality and in the world, but not just for women, for everybody? How do we change the world from going from dominance and fear and control to unity and peace and love? Well, this is something I want to talk about, as well as looking back on the year that was and looking forward to the year that's going to be. I was having a chat with my daughter, who was with some people on Christmas Day, and she said that many of them were non-binary, and if you didn't use the right pronouns, they got really angry if you said she and he instead of they. I know this is a big topic across the world. And that anger, I can understand that they have something that they want to change in the world, but we're just so used to the way it's been. Isn't that just it? We're all used to the way it's been. That change comes slowly when you're so used to saying she or he, and then you've got to change your paradigm and change your mind and say, no, it's not a she or a he, it's now a they. Or we don't even have the language to define somebody that's non-binary, that doesn't associate or identify with being male or female. And so we have to find language. But when your head is not used to it, we make mistakes and they get angry. And, there's the angry vegans and the angry this and the angry that. But anger is not an energy that's going to change the world. Anger is an energy that creates stuckness in the world. So when you get angry at what you disapprove, you actually throw energy at it and you expand it and you make it stay there. So how do we change things without pushing against what was? This is the question. It's about your vibration. It's about looking forward and putting more energy into what you want to create instead of pushing against what you don't want. Most of us do that. We complain about it. We go to counselors about it. We need healing about it, and we talk about it incessantly. This isn't right. We go to doctors and we say, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this. But we rarely look at what it is we do want, because what we don't want sometimes completely overwhelms us and takes all our attention and our focus. I remember years ago, I was with a couple of girlfriends, and one of my girlfriends had left her husband. And so we're cooking dinner, just the three of us. The kids are sort of running around the house somewhere. And the three of us are talking about this dilemma that she's going through, as you do, women getting together, talking about their problems. And she kept talking about what was wrong in her relationship. What was wrong? What was wrong? What was wrong? And I kept asking her, well, what do you want? And she looked at me like I was an alien, like I was crazy. What do you mean, what do I want? Let me tell you what's wrong. And I kept asking her that question. But what is it that you want? And it didn't compute in her mind, because she hadn't actually thought about what she wanted. She only thought about what she didn't want. And so from that, she left her husband and went to her girlfriends and complained about everything that was wrong in her marriage. But when we sat down to dinner, after asking her at least half a dozen times what she wanted, I insisted, how do you see your life? What is it that you prefer? What is it that you want? And she had to really think about it, because all her attention had been on what was wrong instead of what she wanted. Long story short, she got back with her husband, actually. She got back with her husband after a hiatus of leaving him and looking for what she really did want. But what she found, that she really did love being married and married to him. And she sort of did a lot of work around that. So what is it that you want to see in your life, both globally and personally, in 2025? I know you want to see change, but what does that change look like? Maybe you want to see change in your own life, in your body, or in your life circumstances, or in your finances. Maybe you want to see change in the way things are governed and the way systems operate. What is it that you want to see in your life? Can you visualize that? Yeah, Shelley says Equal Rights Amendment was the Equal Rights Amendment. Yeah, at the end of the show, it said that one of the states in America only passed it in 2018. It might not even be passed in all the states in America. I don't even know if it's passed here in Australia, but equal rights. So visualizing what you want is a really powerful thing. And when you do visualize what you want and you put energy behind it, it can become a really powerful manifesting tool, both globally and personally. Esther Hicks from the Teachings of Abraham says, one person connected to the stream of pure positive energy, which is the stream of consciousness of who we are as source energy, which is a stream, a force, a source of pure positive energy. One person connected to that in joy and in love and in excitement and in peace is more influential than thousands who are not. So you can have thousands of people out on the street screaming about what they don't want, and one person that's in peace visualizing what they do want, and that person's much more influential and powerful than all the ones that are in resistance. So this is the challenge for 2025, regardless of what happens to you personally and in the world. Can you stay in that place of peace and love and acceptance and joy? It's not always happy. 20 years ago, I went and did an Abraham cruise in 2004. Was it 2005? Anyway, it was the end of the year 2004, beginning of 2005. And I remember coming away from that cruise and coming home and thinking, wow, this is so easy. All I have to do is be happy, and then everything will come to me. And gee, their famous last words, being happy when stuff is happening around you that you disagree with is not the easiest thing to do. It's possible, but it's not the easiest thing to do. So here was I thinking, God, this is so easy. All you have to do is be happy, and everything you want comes to you. Well, actually, being happy is everything you want, because everything that you want because you think in the having of it, you'll be happy, or you'll be at peace, or you'll be satisfied, or you'll be fulfilled. Everything you're asking for, you're asking because you're asking for that feeling, that experience of feeling good, And what we do as humans is we think, in order to feel good, I've got to change something in my life. I've got to change the outside circumstances. And instead of thinking it's the inside circumstances that I need to change in order to find that happy feeling. Yeah, law of attraction, the power of deliberate creation. This is how it works. Happiness is an inside job. It's all on the inside. It's all about what we're believing to be true. And people will say and argue with you, yeah, but how can you be happy when you see these terrible things happening in the world, when you see the injustice and the trauma and the devastation and the loss? How can you be happy when that happens? Wow, that's a question, isn't it? How can you be happy when that happens? That is the question of life. I was also watching another thing on a streaming network recently about the tsunami that also happened 20 years ago, the biggest tsunami in the world, which was in the Indian Ocean that devastated most of Asia and Thailand and Indonesia. And it's a comprehensive, I think it's called Tsunami if you look for it. It's a comprehensive 4-part mini-series which goes through a lot of the devastation from a lot of people that took video as it was happening. 20 years ago, was it on mobile phones? I guess they were videoing on mobile phones still 20 years ago. But and they pieced together this, and watching the devastation, it is sad. I was crying, make no mistake. I was crying while watching it, but also watching the people find each other. There was a young family that went to Thailand on holiday, mum and dad and the 2 boys that were swept away in the waves and then separated. All of them were separated. And the one brother that was being interviewed was thinking that he had lost his whole family. But when he found his little brother alive, the elation that they felt, oh my God, it's going to make me cry. The elation that they felt when they discovered that they were not alone and that their brothers had survived. The parents did perish, but the elation that they felt, and the relationship, 20 years relationship they've had since then, they've been so close. They were both little when it happened, and so they went into an adopted family, and they both talked about that the family adopted them was a beautiful, joyous, happy family, and they loved being with that family. So there was this blessing out of this drama. But isn't it interesting? You've got this brother, you're a kid, you probably don't think much of him, you probably fight all the time. You probably hate each other, actually, jealousy and competition for your parents' love. And then a tsunami happens, like this devastation happens. And when you find each other, you're the most joyous, the most happy, and that relationship is forever changed. Wow. Sometimes it takes devastation for us to find unconditional love. Isn't that crazy? But sometimes that's what it takes. Anyway, hi to everyone online. So great to see you all online. I'm going to talk about where we've been in last year. Let me just see if I can share my screen. What we went through last year. Here we go. Last week we had the angels online, and I want to give a message from the angels today as well. And we've had healers and messages of love. What have you thought about the shows over the last year? I started on this network, on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, right at the beginning of the year, about 3 weeks in. The first show, actually, with my friend Kristen, talking about her life. I've known Kristen probably for about 8 years, and we talked about her coming on the show. And she said, I'm not ready. She joined the group, and a couple of years into the group, her husband died. And then she went through the death of her husband and all sorts of things. She works at IANS and helps put on IANS, the International Near-Death Association conferences, and she's an amazing person. So she was the first person that came out on the United Public Radio Network. And then her healer friend, Debbie, was the next person, who's an amazing person. And of course, the fabulous Michelle DeRoche was my first live guest, because those two shows that started on the network were actually recorded shows. I recorded them, and I was so nervous. I was so nervous at the beginning of the year to go live again. I'd been live many times. I started on radio probably 16 years ago, on live radio, and was live on radio every Saturday for 5 years, and then went off live radio and was just podcasting and recording. And I did that probably for about, 10 years. And then when I joined the network, I was talking to Michelle, and she was like saying, this is a live show and you're going to go live and press all these buttons and do all these things to make it happen. And I was so nervous. Anyway, so Michelle came on and held my hand and also shared her story. She was my first live show. So thanks, Michelle. She's got a couple of shows on the network. And then we had Jeff Selva, The Rising. He's in contact with the ETs, and that was a great show too. He talked about how the ETs, the grey ETs actually, are teaching humanity, if they want to listen, about ascension and consciousness and enlightenment. Like classically, when we think of ETs or grey ETs, we have been so conditioned to think that grey ETs are evil and they want to get us and what's the word, abduct us and do experiments on us. But actually, Jeff came with a completely different story about what the grey ETs were doing for humanity, teaching us about enlightenment and the power of mind and the rising. He called it the rising, while all the same time helping us with our DNA, helping us change our DNA so that we can hold more consciousness and be more powerful creators. I've had so many people on the show talk about the grey ETs and their power of mind, the things that they can do with their mind, the way they can manipulate matter. We're talking about being deliberate creators and manipulating matter, like I want to change my life. I want this, I want that. As humans, we're all sort of mostly self-focused. I want more money, I want more health, I want more love. But they've moved beyond the selfish desires. They work more as a collective mind. And so all the desires for the grey ETs are about what is good for the collective rather than what is good for the self. Can you imagine? We're still so stuck in self-desires. It's hard to imagine not even thinking about what it is that you want for yourself and only thinking about what you want for humanity. It's possible. Many of us do it. But and so Jeff was talking about his experience with the grey ETs and them teaching us about enlightenment. And I said to him, well, what are they getting from us? If they're teaching us about enlightenment and helping us with our DNA, what are they getting from us? And he said that, they're splicing our DNA with their DNA. And there are many things like the hybrid program. There are many things that they want from us, like our emotional component, because as they evolved the mind and the intellect, they lost a lot of that emotional component. And so they're asking for that back by splicing our DNA, creating the hybrid program. They're creating a new race, a new form of human ET that has more of that feeling emotional component online. Anyway, that was a fascinating show. And then Michelle Dado-Millen, The Power of Activism, which is a documentary that came out about 6 Australian activists. One was a schoolgirl, a Muslim schoolgirl who was talking about climate change. One was a shark girl who wanted to save the sharks. One was talking about consciousness, which I had never seen in an activism sort of documentary before, that there was the consciousness component. And there were many. Anyway, it's a fabulous movie, and Michelle is the director and the creator of that. So I suggest you check that out if you haven't. It's called The Power of Activism. I think it's free online. Just Google it, or maybe you can find it on Vimeo on demand. Anyway, it's out there if you want to watch it. It's a wonderful Australian documentary. And Rebecca Ostel-Clausen. Now, did Kristen tell me about her? She is just so dynamic, this woman. Absolutely one of the most dynamic women I've ever spoken to on the show. It's been a great year, actually. There's been some amazing people on the show this year and more amazing people to come. And Amrit Sandhu, Inspired Evolution, he's got his own podcast. He's an Australian, and he's doing gangbusters on YouTube with his podcast. A lot of people say to me, have you heard of him? Have you seen his podcast? I'm like, yep, not only have I heard of him, I've had him on the show. He actually reached out to me and said, can I come on your show? Because like with many podcasters, we're teachers as well. All of us in the consciousness space who podcast and have conversations are also spiritual teachers or consciousness teachers. And so when we go on other people's shows, we get to sing our songs and share our wisdom. And so Amrit did that on my show. He shared his inspired evolutionary story. And it was beautiful to hear it, actually. And Christine Day, she's amazing. So she lived in the States for ages, the Palladians. She channels the Palladians. But a couple of years ago, I don't know if it was this year or last year or the year before, anyway, maybe last year, the year before, she came back to Australia. Her and her partner came back to Australia, and they moved out to the desert, out to near Uluru, near where the rock is. And they're out there in the desert creating portals and activations. But yeah, she's been around for years, and she's quite popular amongst consciousness explorers, channeling the Palladians. And she lived in the States for ages. But yeah, so that was a fascinating conversation with her. Look at all these amazing people. Lee Chandler, Wise Old Soul, Isha Patel, Paul King, Dr. Eugene Ang. I loved him. Dr. Eugene Ang, Arcturian Energy Healing. He was fantastic. I can't really remember everything I said, but I get a feel when I'm talking to people on the show. I get a feel for people, and I just loved him. He has the channeling component, the psychic component, and the scientific component in one body. And Arcturian healing, energy healing. Yeah, I'd like to have him back on the show, actually. And of course, the fabulous Sandy, Spirit Speaks. We did a few shows with Sandy. Sandra Marie, who is a medium, and we spoke to it was around the time of the Trump shooting, actually. But in Australia, there was a terrible thing that happened in a big shopping centre just up the road from me. A big, expensive shopping centre in an expensive part of, area of Sydney. Sydney is one of Australia's most populated cities, probably the most populated city. And this man with a knife went and stabbed 18 people, killing most of them. So we spoke to a few of those people, the Dead Speak, Bondi Junction stabbings, and we spoke to the guy that was killed during the Trump rally. One of them, was there anyone that was killed? I know there was a few wounded. I can't remember how many died, excuse my ignorance. But the guy that was killed, one of the guys who was the one with the young family, I think he was a firefighter. Anyway, he was fabulous to speak to on the other side. I want to tell you, when tragedy hits, like some of the people killed in the Bondi Junction stabbings, when Sandy found out that there was this young, gorgeous woman who had a baby and they were both stabbed and the mother died, she burst into tears. It's tragic, right? It's really tragic. But when you speak to them on the other side, they're not in their tragedy. They're not upset that they're dead. They're just not. They understand that it was all part of their soul plan. They understand, in fact, that there is no death and that we're never separate. Even the mother with the baby, I suppose the baby who was too young, only a few months old, maybe 6, 8 months old, 10 months old, I'm not sure how old the baby was, who's not talking yet, who hasn't lost her psychic ability. Even though mum's left her physical body, that baby has full communication and contact with mum, who's on the other side. And so the baby is not grieving the loss of its mother because it's still with those psychic faculties, is in full relationship with that person. But wouldn't that be amazing if we were all like that? Wouldn't death be a different story if we maintained that communication and contact with our loved ones after they'd left their body? It wouldn't be such a tragic story. Anyway, this is something I talk about a lot in my practice and on the show. So Sandy and I got together and had a few shows talking to the dead, Spirit Speaks, and they were fantastic. And then we had a few people asking questions, asking for little messages from their loved ones. Sandy's an expert at that. I'm not such a person who does the messages from the dead people. I can, but it's not really my job in the world. There are other mediums like Sandy and other who have that more expertise as contacting your dead relatives. They look at you and they can see the dead relatives around you. Even if I use the word dead, they don't even like me to use the word dead, because in our vernacular, dead means gone, perished, sad, it's all these connotations around being dead. But when you speak to the dead or to spirit, they're more alive than they've ever been. They're just full of love and light, just full of love and light. So, that was a fabulous show. And Prageet and Julianne didn't end up coming on the show, the Stargate experience. I went up there to the Blue Mountains. They came out to Australia to do these activations. They have a huge following across the world, these people, and it's really amazing. The people that came to the Blue Mountains, which is just outside of Sydney, to be a part of the activations, we basically just sat in meditation for days and did these activations through our meditation. They came from all over the world. And they're getting huge gatherings of people. After the Blue Mountains, they went out to Uluru and did more activations out there. And Catherine and Mick Turner have just put on a big cosmic consciousness conference out in Uluru. I'd love to hear about it. So I tell you who I loved this year too. I loved Heidi. Heidi was the whale and dolphin person. She's worked with Joan Ocean, who's now in her 80s now. She's one of the pioneers of people talking about the intelligence in our oceans and how highly evolved the whales and dolphins are. And she's been swimming with them all her life. And Heidi's made many documentaries with Joan Ocean, and she also has her own business taking people out to meet the whales and dolphins and to tune into the consciousness. There are plenty of places in the world that you can go, and my daughter does one of them, take you out whale watching or whale swimming. But can you communicate with these magnificent animals as you're swimming in the oceans with them? You can actually even communicate just sitting in meditation, sitting in your bed or sitting on your couch. you can communicate with the consciousness of whales and dolphins, and they are a highly evolved species on this planet. We think as humans that we are the most evolved species on the planet. I beg to differ. I reckon that you are live. Oh, thank you. It's just telling me we're also live on Odyssey. I reckon that the whales and dolphins are more highly evolved than humans in many ways. So speaking to Heidi was beautiful. Tell me who your favorite was this year. I tell you who I loved also, Judith Collins. Now, who told me about Judith? Oh, Samuel Chong told me about Judith. So Samuel Chong is a Chinese American who had transcribed the book, the Thyova Prophecy or the Thyova Prophecy into Chinese. And he also promotes the wisdom from the book. And I've had Samuel on the show many times. So the Thyova Prophecy is a book about a French-Australian man who was abducted in the late 80s by 9-foot-tall hermaphrodite ETs that came from a 9th category planet. And they, when I say abducted, it wasn't traumatic for him in any way. They spoke to him telepathically before they abducted him. But when you're speaking to a human mind, you're not going to say, oh, I'm going to abduct you. I'll be there at 10 o'clock. What they said to him was, write a note to your wife and say that you'll be away for 4 days. And please don't worry, that you'll be perfectly safe, and you'll explain when you get back where you've been. Poor wife gets this cryptic note. So that's what he did. He wrote this, he had received this telepathic information and wrote a note to his wife saying, don't worry about me. I've just gone away for 4 days. I'll be back soon. I'll tell you all about it when I get back. Went outside, and then they picked him up and took him in their spaceship to their planet. And they gave him all this information. It's one of my favorite books, The Thyova Prophecy, about the history of Earth, how we all came from other planets, all the species, all the nationalities on Earth. They say that the yellow and the black people were the first humans on Earth before Lemuria and Atlantis, and then the white people came from other planets. It's one of the most fascinating books. In the book, he was given the insight that these 9th category planets, ETs, have. He was given the ability to read auras, to see the human energy field around people, and have that telepathic or that insight into who you are and what you're thinking and what's happening in your energy system. And he told me about Judith Collins, who's an Australian lady who lives just out of Sydney, about an hour and a half out of Sydney, that has been doing that all her life. And she's one of the most amazing people. She was just such a gem, she was amazing. She's such a humble woman. Her husband had just died before she came on the show, and she was not in grief at all because, just like I was saying before, she had the ability to communicate with spirit. So she had been basically nursing him for like 10 or 20 years because he'd been sick for a long time. And she was kind of happy that he was dead because she could still have a relationship with him, and now she didn't have to nurse him anymore because he'd left that sick body. Anyway, she just had no grief at all. She had this 50-year relationship in the physical with her husband, but she also understood that she could maintain that relationship after he'd left the physical. But she has this beautiful farm just down out of Sydney, and she grows all her own vegetables. Oh, she's just a wealth, an absolute wealth of knowledge. I just loved talking to Judith Collins. And yeah, Samuel told me about her because when he read the book, The Thyova Prophecy, and he heard about how you can see the human aura and the human energy system, he deliberately looked for people across the world who he could talk to, who could do that, and then talk to them about how they could do that. And he found Judith in Australia, and he even came out to visit her. He came out all the way from the States to meet Judith. So yeah, she's a gem. Craig and Julie McMahon, they just beautiful. So Craig McMahon has made so many movies. You can find them on YouTube and Tubi. Tubi is a free television streaming platform, TUBI. Life to Afterlife. And Julie, they met through the sudden death of Julie's teenage son. When she saw the dead body of her teenage son, she had this instant spiritual awakening, and she was communicating with him in spirit. And so this sort of raise of the Kundalini and raise of her consciousness as she witnessed the dead body of her son and then connected with him in spirit actually took away most of the grief. I don't know if it was all of the grief, because there are times when you come back to your human mind and you're in the loss and the pain, but she basically didn't experience the trauma of losing her beloved teenage son because she had this spiritual awakening. And yeah, they're amazing stories, absolutely amazing stories from those two. I would definitely check them out online. Barbara Witt, New Operating System, was another brilliant teacher. And The Hybrid Journey with Jacqueline Smith, she was fabulous. So she spoke about being an ET on Earth and the hybrid journey. She's amazing. Oh, so many incredible people. Who was your favorite? Phoenix Montgomery and Rachel Vaughan were two people that Catherine and Mick told me about. They were presenters, and also Joanna Waldron. They were speakers at the Cosmic Consciousness Conference, which just happened in Uluru. So I spoke to them about their journeys. Phoenix Montgomery, who's a mentalist and a hypnotist and a performer, he was really interesting, actually. He was really interesting. I think that he's operating on his psychic abilities more than he knows, because he thinks it's mentalism or it's tricks, but he doesn't understand, or maybe he didn't understand, or maybe he does now, I don't know, that a lot of what he's doing is him tuning into psychic ability. But because he's a performer, he thinks of it as a stage act. Anyway, he was interesting. And Louise Charman James, Authentic Voice, another brilliant conversation. And Jonas, A Message of Love, Ken Lloyd, and of course Rachel last year. We've got more amazing people coming up. Sun says, great shows you have. Thanks, Sun. Amazing guest as well. Who would you like to see on the show? Because I am booking people in for 2025 now. And yeah, maybe there's somebody that you want to see on the show. I do have people, I've probably got about 50 emails in my inbox of people saying, please, 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 please put me on your show. So I'm not short of people, but maybe there's some people that you want to know. Shirley often tells me about people that she likes. People often say, put this person on the show, put this person on the show. I want to talk to you about what's behind me. I'm not in my office today with the green screen behind me. I'm downstairs in the living room, and I've got these fabulous works of art above my head sent to me by Brad Mossman, who is an artist. He's an American living in Denmark, and he's the most incredible artist. And he sent me these. I know that my daughter says that one of them looks like a child's drawing, which is a drawing for people listening on radio. It's a drawing of the sun. It's just black and white. It's like black paint on a white piece of paper, just the sun as a circle and spikes coming out of it. And then underneath the sun are clouds with rain coming out of it. And up above the sun is a UFO. I love it. It's like, to me, it depicts, I don't know if this is what Brad meant, but he thought of me and sent it to me and said, oh, this is for you. To me, it depicts that they're flying above all the dramas that we have down on Earth. Like we're in the storm with all the rain, and above the storm is the sun. The sun is shining, and that's where they are. They're flying up there in the sun while we're down here, weathering the storms on Earth. And then the other one is an ET, a mantid ET. He's created this mantid ET, and you can see a UFO in the background. And the mantid ET is talking to the human. It's like an olden days human, like a couple of 100 years ago, toiling the earth with an old sort of piece of equipment that you would toil the earth with to plant seeds. And the mantid is talking to them. I don't know. I have to get Brad. I'll have to ask Brad what he means by that. But I just love it. I just love it. And my friends, because most of the art in my house is like flowers and fruit and it's like really pretty things. They look at this art and they kind of go, huh? I don't get it. How come you've got that on your wall? And I said, I love it. It means so much to me. So I want to shout out to Brad for sending those to me. Let me see if I can find his Instagram. You should check him out on Instagram. He has the most incredible art. He, let me find you, Brad. Brady. He, He's more like a cartoonist. He doesn't call himself a artist. He calls himself, let me find you. Gosh, I shouldn't do this while I'm talking live. Yeah, hard to talk and look for something at the same time. There he is. Unrealistic Art. It's called on Instagram, Unrealistic Art for sale. If you check it out on Instagram, I'm just going to show those people who are watching on the video some of his art. It's incredible. Stop screen. Here we go. I'm flying solo today. Experiencer interviews. Oh, hi, Jan. Happy New Year, Karen. Much love from Canada. Thank you, Jan. You might like this, Moby. There's Moby. Hi, Moby. Hang on. I should really have somebody helping me do this, shouldn't I? But yeah, I'm flying solo today. Here's Brady's art. Unrealistic Art for sale. It's for sale. You might know some people that love it. Lots of monsters. He loves a monster or two. And yeah, it's incredible. He is, as I say, an American living in Denmark. There's a post of him in the paper in Denmark. I think maybe it's an American paper. Picture of him putting up small pieces. He creates these little art galleries in cafes and with tiny miniature art, and people can buy or swap the art in these little mini art galleries. So I wanted to shout out to Brad and show people his amazing art, Unrealistic Art on Instagram. Let me have a look. Yep, and he's also painting skateboards. You should paint some surfboards too. If you were down under, you'd be painting some surfboards. Loves his cat. There's Brady and the cat. Anyway, it's a feast for the eyes. It's an absolute feast for the eyes. There's the little gallery, the little free gallery that he creates. I met Brad. He's a part of our Inner Sanctum tribe. So this year I haven't been too active in the Inner Sanctum. The Inner Sanctum is the online groups that I do. Every month I would put a guest teacher in the Inner Sanctum that you could meet. But this year, because I've been live on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, and we're live and I can speak to you, the chat, I've not done any of the teachers in the Inner Sanctum. It's just been, we've had groups where we just come together. They're not recorded. They're not online. We just come together and chat about things that we want to talk about. And Brad, I don't know, when did Brad join the Inner Sanctum? A few years ago. And so when we put on the Inner Sanctum, it's in the afternoon in the States, it's in the morning in Australia, but it's like midnight in Europe. So he stays up late. What are you saying here, Moby? Haha, very playful and surreal, isn't it? Everyone. So what are you saying here? I recommend Jan King, also Yanni King, also Australia, started channeling Patar, a Palladian, after a UFO contact. She was more active in the 80s and 90s, but Patar is amazing. I have heard of Patar, Moby. I didn't think that they were still around. Is Yanni King still around? Let me know about that. And also, yeah, Jan, you were on the show this year, or was it last year that you were on the show? Let me have a look. Oh, yeah, you were on the show this year. You were the last person I did before I went on the net. I'll have to have you back. I'll have you back in 2000. There you are there. I'll have you back in 2025 because Jan, Experience Interviews, has his own show called Experience Interviews, and he interviews people from all over the world who have had experiences with, what am I trying to do here? With, stop screen, here we go. Let's see if I can share my screen with Jan. Share screen, there we go. Is this going to work? Experience Interviews, here he is. Jan Gray, also known as Mr. Gray, a French-Canadian lifelong experiencer who hosts Experience Interviews, a podcast on YouTube, speaking with people around the world who share their stories and their own extraterrestrial and otherworldly experiences. Yeah, and you've been doing it now for a few years. I think this year your show started to really take off. I've watched this happen with Preston too. I watch this with people who are dedicated to this work of getting the message out there about who we are in our multidimensional reality and how we connect with our galactic neighbors. And of course, Preston, who has the Lightgate with Dolly on this network, was out there on YouTube for years, just sharing some of the stories that he has in his many, many books and plugging away week after week after week, working a full-time job and getting out there and sharing these. And then it started to take off. And I think that that's happened to you too, Jan, this year. It's just started to take off, hasn't it? Nice, he says. Yeah. Shirley says, hi, Jan. So it's great to see you guys out there doing the work. But yeah, I'd love to know more about the Patar. I have heard of it, the Patar channelings, the 80s and 90s, might not still be around. Yes, so where are we? 11:15. I've never been on the live show by myself for an hour and a half. Here I am talking for an hour and a half. And I'm usually quizzing a guest. So this is a new one for me. There was somebody that tentatively said that they were going to be on the show, but I didn't get that organised. I thought, no, I'll talk about the year behind us and the year moving into the year ahead. Guys are yakking online. They're talking to each other. Yeah, what do you want to see in 2025? And put your questions, what you want to see, in the chat. I'd love to hear about what it is that you're looking at that you don't like and what it is that you want to see in the world. The 3 laws of deliberate creation or manifestation or law of attraction are ask, orchestrate, allow. This is from the Esther and Jerry Hicks, the Abraham teachings. Of course, The Secret came out in 2006 as a DVD, and then it became a book. And they changed it to ask, believe, receive. Same thing. But when we look out into the world and what's your take on the recent drone phenomena? I'll get to that in a minute. We did talk about it in the last show, actually. I'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, when we look out into the world or we look out into our lives and we don't like something, there is an asking that happens all the time. We're asking. That Abraham Hicks would say that we are constantly asking. Every cell of our body is constantly desiring and asking for nutrients and oxygen and chemicals. And so the asking process is innate in our process as humans. It's we're asking all the time. When we experience something that we don't want, there is naturally an asking for that which we do want. So when we're sad, we push against the sadness and say, I don't want to be sad. Why don't you want to be sad? Because I want to be happy or I want to feel better. When we feel lonely, we push against it and say, I don't want to feel lonely. Why? Because I want to feel more included or more unified. When you feel poor or when you feel sick, anytime you bump up against contrast or something that you don't want, the asking is within you. There are a lot of teachers, spiritual teachers or law of attraction teachers, that would ask you to do vision boards. But the vision board already happens. The vision board is in your head. For every time you experience something that you don't want, you have a vision of what it is that you do want. But is your focus on that vision, or is your focus or attention on what it is that you don't want? And that's what I was talking about before. Most of us experience what we don't want and then focus on it and talk about it and say, I don't want this, I don't want that, I don't want this. But there is always a vision connected to what you don't want. And that is what you do want. So when you change your focus from what it is that you don't want and put it on what you do want and start to tune into that energy and tune into that frequency, this is how you manifest. So that 3-part process of ask, orchestrate, and allow. The asking is happening within you. The orchestration is the brilliance of the energies of the universe, which have been identified as a law of attraction. Like attracts like energy attracts like energy. Thought attracts thought. It's all this magnetism throughout the universe. The magnetism of the universe is a far greater scientific conversation than just talking about what it is that you want and don't want. But that orchestrating power, that infinite orchestrating potential, infinite orchestrating power, is the power of what people call God or the angels or a law of attraction or the unified field of infinite probability and possibility. It's happening all around us. But how do we play with this unified quantum entanglement, this quantum field? We play with it through our thoughts, through mind, through emotion, through tuning into the frequency of that which we want to see. And that is the allowing process. So that is the third step of the manifestation process, is when you tune into the energy that you want to experience. You tune in. People talk about jumping timelines, that before we insert ourselves into the earth experience, we have designed all these different probability timelines, all these different experiences that, depending on what trajectory we're on a separate timeline. I've had many people on the show talking about timelines. I had one woman on the show who, whose name escapes me, I'll have a look in a minute, who said that she was madly in love with this man that she dated when she was young, and he broke up with her, and she was determined that this was going to be the man she was going to marry. But when they broke up, he was absolutely determined that she wasn't going to be that he was going to marry. So she said she jumped timelines. Instead of being sad about how they'd broken up, she visualized a life with him, being married with him and being happy. And that happened. Now, can we manipulate somebody else? No, because maybe he stayed on the timeline, or that personality stayed on the timeline where he wasn't married to her, but maybe there was another timeline where they were married. So creating realities, people often talk about timelines, jumping timelines. There is a probable reality somewhere in the cosmos, in the universe, in the ether, in the unified field that is exactly what you want. And when you focus on it, when you put your powerful power of attention or power of focus or power of mind on that timeline or on what you want to see, you jump timelines. You manifest what you want, what you want to live. Love that timeline thing. Thanks, son. Now, Moby, what am I saying here? What are you saying here? I'm struggling to discern between my ego's desires and my divine asking. I still have the belief that suffering is needed to learn or to become more compassionate. This is such a great question. Thank you for asking this. So the ego's desires, I want to say something about this too. The ego was designed for you to experience a human life by your higher self. So a lot of spiritual teachers, Eckhart Tolle being one of them, he's a magnificent spiritual teacher. Don't get me wrong, I love him. But a lot of spiritual teachers will say, get rid of your ego, because that ego is the part of us that creates the illusion of separation. So separate to what? Separate to each other, separate to love, separate to everything that we want, separate to our soul, separate to God. Like when we are in suffering, we're feeling separate. We're feeling separate to love. We're feeling separate to our power. We're engaging in thoughts that make us feel limited and powerless, which is not the truth of who we are. But in order to have that experience, we had to invent a mechanism that enabled us, as an extension of source energy, as that pure, positive, powerful potential, creative potential, we had to have an experience of the illusion that we were not that. So the ego was invented, and then the higher self, when electing to come into a physical life experience, designs the ego according to what the soul wants to experience. So by saying I'm struggling to discern between my ego's desires and my divine asking, that's such a great thing to do. All asking is divine, really. Whether you're asking for a Ferrari or asking for enlightenment, it's divine, because you're creating an experience. And from source energy, God or your higher self or your collective soul complex or your group soul or whatever you want to call it, your guides or your angels, are never, ever judging you for what you're doing here on earth. because you as a soul are experiencing what you want to experience, and the ego is all part of that experience. But when you have a desire because you want to fulfill a lack that you feel, that is definitely the desire of the ego. For the soul never feels lack, because the soul is unified and one with all that is. But the soul has the desire to experience. So the soul might have the desire to experience that lack. And so where do we separate the soul desire and the ego desire? Maybe that ego desire of feeling separate to love and then wanting that whole fulfilled in our life is the desire of the soul. So the two are not exclusive to each other. But when you change your focus from I'm feeling this lack in my life that I want to fill, and so I'm going to go out there and make it happen so I feel better. When you change that focus from I want to get what I want to I'm having an experience of lack and my soul is loving it, now you're tuning in to your soul's desire. So when you can appreciate what is, when you can love what is happening to you, all of it, the big, the bad, and the ugly, when you can love it and see it as something that your soul is desiring to experience, now you're tuning into your higher perspective. And now the suffering becomes less, or the suffering disappears, because you realize that the soul is wanting to have this experience, for from this experience of what we call limitation or suffering or trauma on earth, the soul is growing, the soul is learning, the soul is experiencing. And so, yeah, having that discernment between ego desire and divine asking can be one and the same thing. I still have this belief that suffering is needed to learn or to become more compassionate. It's not needed. You don't need to suffer to become more compassionate. I tell you what, just expand your auric field, expand your empathy. Like I find, well, lately, especially lately, I never used to cry at sad things. I always cried at beautiful things when two people had lost each other, had found each other, and then they come together in that moment of reconnection. It's like, oh, I found you. Like you've lost a puppy or your dog or something, and then you found them. Oh, I would like bawl at that, like there's something beautiful. But I found lately that my sensitivity has expanded so much that I'm just crying at everything. I'm just crying at anything. So empathy gives you that compassion, and you don't necessarily have to suffer to have compassion. You just expand your empathetic abilities and you'll find compassion. That's what empathy is. So true. Sun says, thanks, dying one. Yeah, like when you expand your empathetic ability, your sensitivity, and you feel what the other person is feeling, then you find compassion, because then you know that what that feels like. And when you feel somebody else feeling like that, you can feel compassion for that other person and the need to want to help them. Yeah, that's what empathy is. It's not sympathy. Sympathy, I never do sympathy, and my daughter used to hate it that I never did sympathy, because sympathy says, oh, that's terrible. I'm so sad that that's happening to you. Oh, you poor thing. Oh, that's terrible. But in that sympathetic way of being, you're saying that you are limited and suffering, and I feel sorry for you. But empathy is something different. It is like, I have felt like that. I know what that feels like. And, you know, it doesn't feel good. I can empathize with you. But it also sort of says, let me help you move out of that state. There, if you want to move out of that state, if you want to feel better and feel more connected again, I too have felt like that, and I've moved out of that state, and I can help you. So empathy is a beautiful thing. Sympathy is looking at someone with a limited perspective, and empathy is looking at someone with an empowered perspective. What are you saying here? Thank you. That's so helpful, or that's so helpful. Thank you. What I'm hearing is that our soul is always seeking unity and God, which is the abundance and joy and love, but the ego seeks eternal things to fill a lack. Yeah. The ego seeks eternal things to fill a lack. That's definitely true, because the ego believes that it's separate from what it wants. And so it seeks that. I'm separate from feeling good. So I'm going to seek something to feel better, whether that is a fun thing to do or drugs or food or sex, or whatever it is that you're seeking. I need to feel good. I need to feel good. How can I feel good? I'll put on a song. I'll eat more. I'll go for a walk. I'll watch a funny movie. Like, we're always looking to the external to change our mood, to change our state. But the soul knows, or your higher knowing knows, that you are in control of how you feel. You, through the power of mind and focus and consciousness, know how to change your state. You don't need the ice cream or the sex or the great, experience or the movie. You have the power to change how you feel simply by changing your story, like simply by changing your consciousness. And that's the lesson that we come here to learn. We spend lifetimes not understanding our power of deliberate creation. And we're not creating stuff. We're not creating the physical world. We're actually creating the internal world. And the internal world is mirrored outside of us by the physical world. So when we understand that all our power is in the now, in how I feel right now, in what I'm thinking and what I'm believing to be true about myself, all my power is what I'm feeling and thinking, and how I can change that or shift that or move that. All my power is in the now. Whether you're thinking about the past or dreaming about the future or listening to a conversation right now and listening to what you're thinking in this moment, it's all happening in this powerful now. So your thoughts create your reality. Your beliefs create your thoughts. Your thoughts create your experience. And you experience life through your emotions. You experience life through what you deem as good and bad. And what you deem as good and bad is how you feel about it. Most people don't even realize that when they're judging something as good or bad, that they're having an emotional reaction to it. Because not everyone is that empathetic or that sensitive that they're tapped into the way they feel. But when you ask people, when you think about that, how do you feel? Sometimes people go, I've never thought about how I feel about that. All I know is that I don't like it. But when you say, well, what does that feel like? And you tune into your sensitivity, there's your power right now. Can you think about that same thing and feel better? Can you find something to feel better? Can you tell a different story? What's Sun saying here? Yes, empathy is more giving or beneficial. Yeah. Empathy is understanding. Empathy says, I know what that feels like. So when you tune into your emotional guidance system and you think about something that helps you feel better, you know how you feel by the vibration that you're emitting through the thought, I feel like this right now. And what can I think about that feels better? Sometimes the feeling better thought is just a thought of relief. I've shared this story many times online. I'm going to share it again because it's a great one. I was with my ex-husband, or husband at the time, and he was a great student of this work. When I met him, he had not heard about the work of Esther Hicks or The Secret or Law of Attraction or Deliberate Creation. So he was a great student of mine. I think that's why we got on. So because I'm a great teacher and he was a great student. And then he became the teacher and he would throw my words back in my face. Don't you hate it when that happens? So we were out somewhere one day and we'd had a fight about something. I was really angry at him. And I was in my head, in my story, I hate the way you do this. And why am I married to you? How can I be with such a loser? Like, I'm really in my head with my story. And I remember we got in the car and he was driving and he turned around and he said, what do you love about me? He was trying to change my state because he knew that in my head, I don't know what I was saying verbally. This is like years ago. I think I was more just silent and angry in my silence, but he was tuning into how I felt. And he like threw my words back and like, change your state. What do you love about me? And in that moment of hating him, I couldn't find anything I loved about him, right? Because when you're in your story and somebody says, think positively, it's almost impossible. When you're in your negative story, when you're in your hate story, it's almost impossible to quantum leap. It's not completely impossible. It can be done, but it's almost impossible to quantum leap from I hate this to I love that. But you can move incrementally. So I thought, damn, he's thrown my words back in my face. The student has become the teacher. What do you love about me? He said, oh, okay, I'm going to do this. I want to stay in my story. I want to be right. I want to be right about how everything is wrong, but this is not serving me. It's not serving anyone around us, and it's not serving him. So change your state. And the next thought was, well, I like the fact that you're driving, because if I was driving right now, I'm so angry, I'd probably crash the car. So not a blissful, beautiful thought, but just the next better step from everything is wrong to there's something happening that is right or that I approve of. And then the next one was, yeah, it's great the way that you always, drive around and, you're there for me and support me in that way. And you drive the car all the time and I don't have to drive all the time. So there's a more loving thought. There's a thought of gratitude and appreciation. That was a bit of a quantum leap, I have to say. But once you reach that gratitude, what you can appreciate about the situation that you're in, what you can appreciate, once you find acceptance, you can find gratitude and appreciation quite easily from acceptance. Anger is actually not a very low emotion. There are much lower emotions than anger. It's quite easy to get out of anger into acceptance. And once you move up that emotional scale into acceptance and gratitude, then you can move so easily from that place of appreciation into pure love again. And so that quantum leap from I hate you, I'm married to a loser, I'm going to leave you, all that stuff that you think, to, oh my God, I love you so much, was quite easy. But it does take focus and work, because it's so easy to stay in the story that we feel right about, this, that we justify. We can feel right about this story, but how does that story feel? Moby's laughing. Son's laughing. There's only a few of you online today. I know it's the end of the year, probably out doing everything. Moby says, this is pure, this is super practical and what I needed to hear right now. Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for tuning in. This is what I do as a teacher of deliberate creation. I teach you about your power of focus and power of mind. And I have to say, I was talking about that fabulous guy, Jeff Selva. I think I might have him back on the show too next year, because I really liked Jeff. He's been doing the rounds on many different podcast shows. You can find him all over the place. This is something that the Greys were teaching us about enlightenment, about our power of mind and power of focus, and how with just a little effort and a little work, we can absolutely shift our reality. When I was a young single mom, my daughter was like about 4 or 5, or she was very young. I was struggling financially, and I knew about all this stuff. Knowing about it, reading about it in books and knowing about it, like when you read a book and you read something that your heart knows or that your soul knows, it just feels like pure truth to you. So I'd read all these books and it felt like pure truth to me. And I knew it as my reality, as my truth, but I wasn't living it, because I was still in my default settings of basically in your subconscious programming. Because as humans, we come into this world and we just get programmed. We're not enough. We're not good enough. We're limited. You can't get what you want. Don't give up your day job. Don't follow your passions. We just get programmed. Do this, go to school, get a job, have a mortgage, blah, blah, blah. We get programmed. And so we've got this operating system that's running us. And then we have a spiritual awakening. We get abducted by aliens or something happens. And we start thinking, oh my God, I have the power to change my life. But we're bumping up against our programming, against our conditioned thought forms and beliefs. And although we can listen to a podcast or read a book or be enlightened by a guru or a teacher or a master, and we can hear the truth and know it as truth, applying that truth practically to your life is a whole nother story. So knowing it as truth and living it is completely different things. So this was one of those days I was all unhappy about how I had all these bills to pay and I had no work. I was working, I think, catering in the film industry, and the work wasn't coming in, or not enough was coming in to pay the bills, and the husband wasn't paying any maintenance, and I had all these bills, car bills, rent, blah, blah, blah. The story, feeling limited and then lack. And then reading this work in a book, I think it was before the internet, and feeling like I can create abundance and feeling really poor. and then knowing that I needed to change my state or change my mood and find gratitude or appreciation, and not knowing where to look for it. Just lying on the couch and looking out at the trees, at this little garden. There were big trees in the garden, just blowing in the wind, and just stilling my mind and looking for something to appreciate. And just appreciate sitting there on the couch, watching the trees blow in the wind, and then finding that appreciation for the beauty of nature. It's so easy to do because we're surrounded by nature. Even if you're in the snow, even if you're in the icebergs, you've got no trees around you. Nature is everywhere. And just tuning into the magnificence and the gift that nature is, and finding that gratitude that I could have that appreciation for nature. And as I'm sitting on the couch, feeling grateful instead of feeling worried and stressed, the phone rang and it was a job. And I remember thinking, God, that was quick. Really? It can happen that quickly? And it can. When you shift your state, what does Wayne Dyer say? When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Like, we are powerful. And it just takes a little work in moving out of a negative feeling thought to a better feeling thought, to a better feeling thought, to a better feeling thought. And we can shift timelines. We can shift our reality. We are powerful, genius creators. Now, what time is it? Oh, we've got about 20 minutes left of the show. Is there anything that you want to ask about this? Thank you for your question, Moby. That was fantastic. I loved that question about finding the discernment between the soul's desire and the desire of the ego. But what we do when we start our spiritual journey is we go into the or our awakening journey, in fact, our consciousness journey. We go into the story of right and wrong, that this is right and this is wrong, because there's a lot of teachers out there that are going to tell you what's right and what's wrong. And from your soul's perspective, when you speak to dead people who are back in that soul's perspective, none of it is wrong. None of it is wrong. So if you can let go of the discernment of right and wrong and see all of it as wanted, then you are on the path to true power in being a genius, deliberate creator of your reality. Remember, I said that saying, I repeated that saying from Esther and Jerry Hicks from the Teachings of Abraham. One person connected to the stream of pure positive energy is more influential than thousands, than millions who are not. So when you can look at life through your soul's perspective, I'm laughing because there is a beautiful spiritual teacher who was embodied for many years, who passed away probably about a year ago, called Michael Tamura. Michael Tamura had 7 near-death experiences, and during those near-death experiences, he experienced great suffering. Now, this was a spiritual master here on earth, and people would ask, why would a spiritual master who has mastered the power of mind and emotion go through so much suffering? And it's interesting, when you spoke to Michael, or when you speak to Michael, because he's still available to speak to, he's here right now inspiring us. He always tunes in when I do the teachings. He's probably with me all the time, I say. Even before he left his body, I felt him around me, his masterful soul around me, teaching me all the time. I recognized him when I first had him on the podcast. I had him probably on about 8 times. In the first session I had with him, I recognized him as one of my teachers in spirit, not one of my teachers in the physical. I actually never did one of his physical courses here on earth, but in spirit, he was one of my guides. And so I felt him around me all the time, and still do. So he had this traumatic life where he went through a lot of pain and suffering, and people would think, why, if you're a spiritual master, would you go through that? But in everything that he experienced, when he first came on the show, he was talking about his first near-death experience. We had gout, but he had it throughout, his systemic gout. Oh, God, it sounded like so much suffering. He didn't suffer. He didn't suffer. Maybe if you speak to Raphael, his wife, she would say something different, because I'm sure there were times where he was moaning and groaning in pain. But he had heart attacks and strokes and all sorts of things when he had near-death experiences. And with all of it, he experienced it as experience rather than suffering. So he had someone read his chart once and look at his life and said, wow, you've had a really traumatic life. You've had a really hard life. And he said, I don't see it as hard. I don't see it as traumatic. Although all these things have happened to him, he didn't see it as trauma or suffering. So what is suffering but perspective? Really, what is suffering but perspective? Can you look at what you're going through, good or bad, how you're deeming it? Can you see it as experience and wanted instead of something unwanted? Thank you again. I think Yang wanted to hear more about the drones. Yeah, the drones. Yeah, I forgot. Thank you, Moby, for the drone. Well, my perspective on the Mobes. I've spoken to many people about them. I've listened to many people, but with everything I do, I've been talking to people for 30 years, teachers and healers and experiences. With everything that anybody says, I always tune in with spirit guides, who I reverently call my mob or my higher self, and I ask them what it was. And they said, for the most part, it is human made. They don't go into too much detail about why. So the lady I had on the show last week, who was the angel lady, said that there are military drones looking for something that has been lost, some weapon or something that's been lost, and they're looking for them. That was one of her stories, and I'm sure that is the truth. And there are many stories coming out, and as humans, we love to say either or. We love to say, is it the aliens or is it the humans, back engineered technology? And what my guides always say is that any probability or possibility that you can think of also applies. So it's all of it. Yes, some of them are ET consciousness, and yes, some of them are back engineered technology, and yes, some of them are balloons put up in the sky with lights on them. I saw that on Instagram. And yes, some of them are just, people playing with their drones. It's all happening. Once a phenomena happens across the world and people jump on it, they all kind of get involved and they launch these drones. And yes, some of them could be angelic, lights in the sky that people are seeing. It's all happening. But for the most part, when I asked about the majority of the drones, they said it is man-made. Some of it is really heightened technology that is not known by the mainstream world. It is back-engineered technology. Because when I asked them about the orbs that you see, I posted a couple of, shared a couple of them on Instagram, of those sort of orb-looking lights, they said what you're witnessing there is a back-engineered technology, and that orb sort of light is the energy field. You're looking at an energy field that is surrounding the craft, and that energy field is appearing to you as an orb, which was something I didn't know. That was something the mob told me, the guides told me, because I said, surely the orbs are the ETs, and they said, no, for the most part, they're actually man-made, back-engineered technology. And what you're witnessing as you see this flashing, changing light is the energy field. You're looking at an energy field. And I was like, wow, that's fascinating. And then I started thinking about, God, there is technologies that human has, that's in our hands, that is not out in the public. That is so amazing, because it has been given to us by our galactic neighbors, by our ET friends. It has been given to us. Many of the downed craft that have happened over the last 70 to 100 years has been purposeful, because the ET, our cosmic neighbors, has been giving us their technology. Not all of them. Some of them actually crashed, but some of them were sort of staged so that we would gain that technology. I had Susie Hansen on the show a few times, and she talks a lot. So Susie Hansen is a New Zealand woman who's an experiencer, and Jan's had Susie on the show, haven't you, Jan, if you're still listening, Mr. Gray? And she talks about a lot of the technology. And I remember I went to see Susie talk when she came out to Australia a few years ago, and she was talking about the technology. And one of the apparatuses that the ETs gave to humans was a handheld about the size of a brush, or a remote control, like a thick remote control, a handheld device that you could put over the body, and it would not only x-ray it, it would show the different blood vessels, and you could change the settings, and you could see blood vessels, and then you could see nerves, and then you could see ligaments, and then you could see bones, you could see all the different things. So it was like this multi-purpose x-ray, handheld x-ray device. And she said that has come out as that's in operation now in hospitals. and that was given to us from the ETs. And I was watching a thing on YouTube yesterday, like new inventions or technology, and they actually showed that. It was a thing on YouTube that I watched. It was showing cars and drones and all sorts of things, but it showed this handheld device looking, x-raying the body and showing all the different things inside the body. And I thought, oh, that's what she was talking about. But I asked Susie, I said to Susie, now hang on. So I'm somebody who's done, now what time is it? I've only got 10 minutes to go. I've got to watch the clock. I'm somebody who's done a lot of, healing workshops when I was younger and developed my psychic abilities. And I have the ability to x-ray the body with my consciousness, right? They call it, what do they call it? Remote view or medical intuition, they call it. You can look inside the body with your psychic ability. Surely if I was taught that as a human, the ETs know how to do that. Why would they develop a technology that does that when they can do that with their consciousness? And she said to me, oh, they didn't develop this technology for them. They can do that with their consciousness. They developed that technology for us. And I'm like, wow, isn't that amazing? So yeah, the ETs are out there developing technology for humans to use. I thought that was so great. Yeah, what are you saying here? Whoa, that's straight out of Star Trek. Amazing. I know. I was reading an article before I came online today about how, beam me up, teleportation is becoming a reality. Teleportation. And I was thinking about it before I read the article, actually. They weren't talking about teleporting physical objects or people, which will become a reality. I heard Deepak 30 years ago. I heard Deepak talking about how that would become a reality one day. But they were talking about they were teleporting particles. But then I thought about it and I'm thinking, here I am streaming to you all across the world on syndicated radio, on the United Public Radio Network, and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, get the station ID in 107.7 and 105.3 FM. Here I am talking to you all across the world, and it is happening through teleportation. There is information traveling outside of time and space and being delivered to you. I'm sitting in my lounge room in Sydney, Australia, and you're listening or watching me on the other side of the world, or maybe somewhere in Australia. That is actually information that's being teleported in the quantum field and happening simultaneously. It is amazing, but we are already utilizing teleportation through our internet systems and mobile phones and television. It's already been utilized, but this article was more about not just information as in media like radio waves or visual or movies, but other particles they were talking about. I didn't finish reading the article actually. But yeah, we are moving into a new world. All the way in Canada. Yeah, I've got a few Canadians online today. I've got you and Shirley and Jan. Where are you in the world, Moby? Oh my gosh, not going through TSA security and red-eye flights would be amazing. Wouldn't it be amazing? I have a memory of being somebody that knows how to teleport. And I had a past life, not regression, a past life memory come to me. And in another life, I don't know if it's future or past, they're laughing at me as I say that, because it's in a more evolved, it's in the past, but it's in what we would deem future. I know that sounds crazy, but it's in a time where it's actually on Earth, it's a life on Earth, where the technology was much more in heightened than what we have here now. And I was involved in teleportation. I don't know if I invented it or if I maintained it or if I was just using it, but I do have a memory of that. Eye scan memory too, yeah. Oh, Moby's in California. Yeah, fantastic. So what do you want to see happen? I'm going to leave you with this as we've got 7 minutes left of the show. What do you want to see happen in your life personally and in the world globally? Maybe there is a political party that you love or hate, regardless of your judgment of that. What do you want to see happen? I know what I want to see happen. I want to see the old systems crumble and new systems rise up, especially in our education system, our transport system, the way we propel our vehicles, the food systems. I want to see change in all those areas. I think that's actually on the ball, on the cards, change in all those areas that's happening. But humans don't normally, back to your question, Moby, humans don't normally change easily. There's usually some sort of trauma that needs to happen for humans to really change. So next year is a year 9 numerologically. It is a year of evolution and change. I understand the 9. To enter a building, son says a memory scan to enter the building. I understand the 9 because I'm born on a 9 day and a 9 month and a 9 year, and even my mobile phone number adds up to 9. My house number adds up to 9. My name adds up to 9. It's crazy. When I think about this, I say to the universe, you really do have a sense of humor, don't you? But evolution and change has been a constant in my life. Even my poor first husband, every time he'd come home, I'd change the furniture because I'd get bored and change things around. He never knew if he was in the right house or not. It's constant change. But yeah, life is about constant change, how we navigate change, how can we deal with change. And next year is going to be a big one. I think it was Rachel that said on the show last week, the angel lady, Rachel Corpus, that 2024 will be the last year that felt normal. And I thought that was an interesting statement. Not my statement, that was her statement. Did 2020 feel normal or 2021 feel normal? There was nothing normal about those years. It hasn't actually been normal since 2020, but that was an interesting statement from the angels. So big changes afoot next year, 2025. How are you going to navigate those changes globally and personally? There have been big changes in the world already. There's been a lot of this year. 2024 has been the year of the climate change. There have been so many natural disasters, earthquakes, flooding across the world. The flooding has been exponential. Even in the Dubai, in the desert, there have been flooding. I have to say that was more man-made than Mother Nature doing that. I think that they had apparatuses in the sky to create rain, and it went a little haywire and it flooded. I think that was man-made, I heard. But yeah, there has been exponential. 2024 will go down as the year of natural disasters. It's been amazing. But next year will be more change in every way, a change of systems. But how do you want to see that change helping you and helping humanity? Visualize, visualize, visualize. Like if I can leave you with anything, every time you bump up against a negative thought or a thought that doesn't feel good, ask yourself, what is it that I want? And move your focus from disagreeing with what you don't want or suffering over what you do want and focusing on what you do want. It's very hard to do, I know, when you're sick. A lot of people who are in a lot of pain tend to focus on the pain and keep thinking about the pain and how can I heal the pain and how can I get over the pain and how can I fix the pain, instead of visualizing themselves out of pain, because pain does take our attention, doesn't it? Yeah, so many natural disasters. Wasn't that a great show? Thank you, darling one. It was beautiful to have you online with me. Continue and to be grateful. Absolutely. Don't try, but don the soul's perspective. Ask yourself that great question, that Moby, is this desire coming from my ego where I feel there's a hole or a lack in my life? Or is it the desire that my soul is desiring? And tune your focus from your wanting and your striving into what is the soul desiring. Just ask yourself that question and you'll feel it. You'll get the information. We're all connected to our guides. We are a member of a team, a spiritual team that is close to us as breathing. In fact, this is the message from the Team Books by Frances Ray Key. I might get Frances back on the show next year, who channeled 4 amazing books called the Team Books after her mother died in 2010. And the team that channeled through Frances to deliver this information says, you're never alone. You're not even operating as one person. You are a member of a team, a spiritual team that is as close to you as breathing. And some people call those spirit guides, and some people call that higher self, and some people call that galactic consciousness companions, and some people call it, I irreverently call it the mob. But we are a member of a spiritual team. We are never alone. The illusion of aloneness is the experience that we can have as humans on earth, but we are never alone. We are a member of a spiritual team, and that consciousness and intelligence is constantly flowing through us and to us. So when you have a question like, is this desire coming from my ego or is it coming from my higher self? You will receive the answer instantly. Instantly. All guidance is instant. So this is something that I do with my courses. I teach you how to connect to that exalted guidance. What have we got left? We've got 1 minute left. And here are the messages from your soul and your higher self. Thank you, everybody who's been listening to the show. Great to be with you this year. Next year is another exciting year. Let me know if you have some people you want to see on the show, or if you indeed want to come on the show and have a conversation with me. It's been wonderful to be with you all. We are never alone. We are never alone, Moby. Thank you so much for this stream, for a wonderful year. Thank you. Thank you, everybody that's been tuning in, and to all those gorgeous people in Canada and in the States and all over the world, in Australia and New Zealand. And I will be back in 2025 with more wonderful shows. Big love to you all. Bye for now.